Welcome, history enthusiasts and story lovers, to the Blade of History, your journey into one of the most turbulent, tragic, and thrilling periods in Chinese history. In our last episode, we left off with an image of profound chaos. The imperial palace smouldering, the eunuchs, once the puppet masters of the court, annihilated, and Grand Marshal He Jin, who invited the wolves to the capital's door, murdered and decapitated. Emerging from the chaos, holding the young Emperor Shao and his brother, the Prince of Chenliu, was the ambitious frontier warlord, Zhuo, who presented himself as a savior. The stage was set. The decentralization of military power, a necessary evil to crush the Yellow Turban Rebellion, had now brought a provincial army to the very heart of the empire. Zhuo had the emperor in his grasp, and with him the ultimate source of political legitimacy. In today's episode, we witness how one man's ruthless ambition curdles into outright tyranny. We will see deception, the unseating of an emperor, and the tragic end of an empress. And we will see a single act of defiance that will ignite a fire across the land. Dongzhuo's seasoned army was a formidable presence. These troops were made up of hardened veterans of the western frontier, men accustomed to brutal warfare. But Dongzhuo was shrewd. He knew that in Luoyang, he was still militarily outmatched. The city was garrisoned by the elite northern and southern armies, as well as the elite imperial guards, and the forces of other warlords summoned by the late He Jin were still present too. A direct power play was too risky. So, he employed a masterful deception. As recounted in the historical texts, Dongzhuo put on a grand show. During the day, he would march his entire army into Luoyang with great fanfare, banners waving, drums beating, a spectacle of overwhelming strength. But at night, under the cover of darkness, he would secretly march those very same soldiers out of a different gate, have them circle around, and march them back into the city the next morning, appearing as a fresh column of reinforcements. For days, the defenders of Luoyang and the other court officials watched in growing dread as this seemingly endless river of steel flowed into their city. Their morale disintegrated. How could they possibly stand against a commander with a seemingly inexhaustible army? Through this simple but brilliant trick, Dongzhuo shattered the confidence of his rivals. Without a fight, he took command of the leaderless imperial guard units, merging them with his own. He then took command of the northern and southern armies and appointed his own men to key military posts. The wolf was no longer at the door. He was prowling the halls. But military control was only the first step. To truly cement his authority, he needed to control the Son of Heaven, the Emperor himself. And the young Emperor Shao was not the pawn he was looking for. Dongzhuo saw Emperor Shao as an obstacle. At 13 years old, he was old enough to have his own thoughts, and more importantly was connected by blood to the powerful court faction of his mother, Empress Dowager He, and her family. His gaze fell instead on the emperor's younger half-brother, the 9-year-old Prince of Chenliu, Liu Si. During the chaotic flight from the palace, the young prince had shown a remarkable composure that had impressed the warlord. While Emperor Shao was terrified and barely able to speak, the young prince had calmly recounted the events that had transpired and commanded that they be escorted back to the palace. In this young boy, Dongzhuo saw not a future ruler, but a perfect puppet. Intelligent enough to command respect, but young enough to be easily controlled. His first move was to isolate the emperor from his protectors. Dongzhuo's soldiers surrounded Empress Dowager He's palace. He accused her of poisoning her own mother-in-law, who had raised the younger prince and was his staunch advocate, and for conspiring against the state, he declared her unfit and had her deposed, forcibly relocating her to an isolated palace. The most powerful woman in the empire, who had schemed and plotted to place her son on the throne, was eliminated without ceremony. with the Empress Dowager neutralized, Dong Zhuo convened the court. Surrounded by his soldiers, he announced his intention to depose Emperor Shao. He declared that Emperor Shao was weak and unfit to rule. Most importantly, he claimed the emperor lacked Wei Yi, a critical concept in classical Chinese governance. Wei means power and might. Yi refers to ceremony and dignified bearing. Together, Wei Yi is translated as awesome deportment, the majestic, awe-inspiring presence an emperor needed to embody his role as the son of heaven. Historical accounts, like those in the Book of the Later Han, note that even Emperor Shao's own father, Emperor Ling, had found him frivolous and considered bypassing him for the throne. Dong Zhuo now seized upon this perception as his public justification. With a feigned reluctance, he then proposed that the wise and composed Prince of Qianliu should ascend the dragon throne. The court was paralyzed with fear. The deposition of a sitting emperor was a treasonous act, a challenge to the very foundation of the Han Dynasty. But who would dare to object? One man did. That man was Yuan Shao. The head of the prestigious Yuan clan, a family that had produced high ministers for 4 consecutive generations, he was himself a man of immense authority. As a close confidant of the now-deceased He Jin, he had been a key player in the plot to oust the eunuchs and had encouraged the summoning of Dong Zhuo to the capital. Now, he watched in horror as his schemes gave rise to an unrestrained monster. In the throne hall, Yuan Shao stood up and openly challenged Dong Zhuo's plan to install a new emperor. He declared the plan treasonous, arguing that the emperor was young but had committed no crime to warrant his removal. The records of the 3 kingdoms recounts the antagonistic standoff, with Yuan Shao stating, "His Majesty, the emperor is still young. It may be that his conduct has not always been correct, but he has not displayed his faults to all the world so that they may be heard and known. And you, General, have come from a distance, and your knowledge of the affairs of the court cannot equal that of us who have been here all our lives. To depose the legitimate heir and set up another is the greatest rebellion in all the world." Dong Zhuo was enraged by this public defiance. It is said that Dong Zhuo openly challenged Yuan Shao. "Do you want to try the sharpness of my sword?" The tension was palpable. For a moment, it seemed blood would be spilled right there in the hall. But Yuan Shao knew he was surrounded. To fight now would be suicide. In a final dramatic gesture of contempt, he drew his sword, saluted the throne, and stormed out of the palace, stating the sword of Yuan Shao may not be a sharp one. He hung his seals of office on the gate of Luoyang and fled east, toward his family's sphere of influence. His flight sent Dong Zhuo into a rage. He immediately considered sending cavalry to pursue and kill Yuan Shao. The histories tell us he was stopped by his advisors, who warned of the Yuan family's immense influence. To kill Yuan Shao would be to make him a martyr. It would give every regional lord a perfect reason to form an alliance and declare war. They argued it was better instead to appease him. Dong Zhuo, recognizing the danger, reluctantly agreed. He issued an imperial edict, appointing the fugitive Yuan Shao as the Grand Administrator of the Bohai Commandery in the hopes of appeasing the general. But the events had already been set in motion. Dong Zhuo had shown his hand. He had deposed a rightful emperor and installed a child puppet. And in Yuan Shao, he had not just created an enemy, he had created a leader for the opposition. Yuan Shao's escape wasn't the end of their conflict. It was the signal that a greater war was about to begin. Back in the court, the histories describe a heart-wrenching scene. As Dong Zhuo's men approached the throne, Empress He wept bitterly. Her son, Emperor Shao, was forcefully unseated and stripped of his imperial seal, henceforth to be referred to merely as the Prince of Hongnong. The Prince of Qianliu was then crowned as the new Emperor Xian on September 28th. 189 AD. Dong Zhuo then arranged for a swift and final end for Empress He. Just 2 days later, he sent his subordinate to her palace with a cup of poisoned wine. When she refused it, she was strangled. To eradicate her family's influence entirely, Dong Zhuo even had Empress He's mother put to death. In a further display of the depths of his sadistic control, a month later, on October 29, 189 AD, Dong Zhuo arranged a funeral for the murdered Empress Dowager and forced the new child emperor to attend. The ceremony was a mockery. Dong Zhuo declared that since Empress He had been deposed, she did not merit the honors of an empress. The officials who attended were forced to wear plain colors rather than the proper white mourning attire, a deliberate and public insult that stripped her of her dignity even in death. Dong Zhuo now sits on a throne built on blood and fear, with a child emperor as his mouthpiece. But his tyranny has not gone unanswered. A single act of defiance has become a spark. Yuan Shao carries the tale of atrocity with him, and the lords of the land are listening. The call for a coalition is about to be answered. Join us next time as the warlords of the empire unite in a grand alliance. Their goal: to march on Luoyang, destroy the tyrant Dong Zhuo, and save the Han. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps us out. And subscribe for more deep dives into the epic history of ancient China. New episodes every week.